Hey there, Knicks fans. Guess who's back? It's your boy Jonathan Macri with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Man, it's been a hot minute since I have sat in this chair, certainly. Um, Coming to you 1:30 a.m. New York time, but as far as my body clock is telling me, it's 10:30 because I have been on the West Coast for 3 weeks now, until a couple hours ago, when after a slight delay, my plane landed safely, touchdown here, not actually in New York, touchdown in Newark, but was back in the friendly confines in short order. And man, it's been it's been quite a few weeks. I don't know that I could fully wrap my mind around the entirety of it all. I don't know if anybody listening A has family and like a wife, kids, like the whole thing, and B has spent multiple weeks away from their home, and not just multiple weeks away from home. We were kind of constantly on the move. We were in Vegas, I believe. Let's see, the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th. So I guess we stayed in Vegas. No, I think we stayed in Vegas only 4 nights. And that was our longest stint in any one place. We're staying at my uncle's. Shout out to my uncle Mark in North Vegas. Very hospitably put us up. But then from then on, we were constantly on the move. We were never in one hotel for more than 3 nights. We were never in more than one city for more than 5 nights, and just kind of gradually made our way up the coast, bouncing from Palm Springs to San Diego. Had to do the requisite Disney trip in California, so spent a couple days in Anaheim, on to LA, Universal, Little Beverly Hills, and then a couple stops along the coast, Pismo Beach, um, and eventually um, made our way up to San Francisco, and that's where we kind of concluded our trip. And it was really really nice, and it was really fun. And I'll wait until I get on here with Jeremy and Andrew this weekend for maybe a little bit, couple more specifics about the trip. But it's been good. It's been good to get away. And as far as as far as the Knicks go, and obviously I'm recording this now because we did have a little bit of news earlier today. It was interesting that the in most of the time that I was away was defined by the absence of news. And I thought it was and that being said, I thought the timing of the three things that did happen could not have been more fitting. So there was the Cam Payne signing, which I realized actually when I was setting up to do this, I haven't really talked about. I was on only once over the last 2.5 weeks or whereabouts, and it was for the Tibbs extension. But we did a live stream, but I was really that on the whole time we really focused on Tibbs, and there were a couple bigger picture stuff. So I haven't really, other than a 2 minute video, I haven't really said much about the Payne thing. But the Payne, so the Payne signing happened, the like within an hour of us arriving in Palm Springs, which was our first stop after Vegas. So sure enough, we were in Vegas. I was in Vegas for 5 days for Summer League, waiting for something to happen during Summer League. And within, literally hours of me leaving Vegas and Summer League, the first bit of news breaks. Then I'm off and running on my trip. And this trip was like, I don't get me wrong, I enjoyed there are a lot of things that I enjoyed about this trip. And again, I'll get into those at some point. But this was very much a trip for my family, my wife, my older daughter, like something to do during the summertime. I could be happy in a closed room with a book and a laptop. Um, but you know, normal people like to actually do things with their lives. So yeah, like seeing the sites, going all the different places in on the West Coast and everything. There was exactly one thing, just one thing that I had circled on my itinerary. I'm like, I don't care what we do. I just want to do this one thing during this 3 week stretch, and it was to visit the Academy Museum in Los Angeles, in Los Angeles. And I said this when I did the Tibbs live stream, but I thought it was funny that the Tibbs news broke literally as I walked into the exhibit that I wanted to see the most, the Godfather exhibit, which I'm still wearing the hat, haven't taken it off. Yeah, in that museum. So that was that, and then the Achiuwa news on Tuesday broke as I like immediately after I boarded our plane to come home. So and like once I don't know if you've ever been on a plane, but like once you're on the plane, you kind of got to stay on the plane. If I hadn't got on the plane, because there was actually a little bit of a delay for takeoff, so if I hadn't gotten on the plane, I probably could have squirreled away in some little place in the San Francisco airport and maybe recorded a little bit of something or whatever. But was not the case. So here I am, and look, let's start with Precious, and then maybe we'll work our way backwards because I think the Precious move should not come as a surprise to anyone. Um, in that, I mean, from several different perspectives. The first of which is the Knicks. Like we first heard rumors of the fact that Hartenstein was probably not going to be back. That I mean, it was the night of the Mikal Bridges trade. The way the Mikal Bridges trade was reported, the from Woj and from Ian and from others, like we knew then Hartenstein was probably gone. And that was, I mean, we're talking at this point, that was 6 weeks ago. Or about, 5.5, 6 weeks ago, whatever it was. So the Knicks have been, as far as I'm concerned, because again, I saw the reports on Hartenstein that night. I'm like, oh, it's just not happening. He's not going to be back here. Um, I'm like, what are they going to do at center? And there's been so much conversation about could they address it via trade? Could they sign someone in the free agent market back when there were actually decent centers on the free agent market? Like, and then the longer things go, there's all kinds of different conspiracy theories. Oh, well, maybe there's something larger at play. Maybe the cat rumors, obviously that those made the round. Shout out to CP of Knicks Fan TV. Like I've written about cat because like I those rumors, that was legit. Like there was basis to, or I think truth to the fact that they were kicking those tires. So we've been through all of this different stuff, and yet the most likely scenario to how they would address the backup center position would be just bring back Precious Achiuwa. Bring back the guy that you know at the very least can give you rotation minutes at this position. Is it his best position defensively? It hasn't been. That being said, one of the things that I'm very interested in is seeing, okay, now that this team is going to have hopefully a healthy OG Anunoby back, you want to throw Randall into this mix, but especially Mikal Bridges, their roster is so much better set up for a defense that employs more switching, which is not something that Tom Thibodeau has ever really done. We know what he wants to do with the centers. He wants to play drop defense, very little, like hard hedging or anything of that nature. It's just like it's by the book. Does that change now? I'm not saying that they will change it for Precious. He's not a good enough player to warrant changing your defense to accommodate him. But with their other pieces on their roster, is it was it maybe did it make even a little bit more sense to stay in-house with Achiuwa as opposed to going and getting someone else? Now, as I say that, I will of course note that um, there's no guarantee that Precious Achiuwa even opens the season as their backup center. They could go out and they could trade for a backup center, a new backup center tomorrow. I'm not saying they're going to do this or that they should do this, and in fact, they certainly should not do this. But like from a salary perspective, they could flip, Deuce McBride and a minimum contract, or like there's McCullough still hasn't signed what we assume will be a two-way deal. So if they yank him to an NBA contract, um, there are different ways that they could cobble together still salary even after they signed Achua, and obviously they can't use Achua now in a sign and trade. But like they could go out and get Nick Richards, again Deuce and like a minimum. They could go out and still trade for Walker Kessler. Like I have no idea if he's available. Like maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But like Deuce can make that happen. I'm not sure off the top of my head how much like Jalen Duren makes, but there are way, he doesn't make a lot of money. So you can go out and like there are different possibilities that still exist. My assumption, and this is to piggyback off of something that I opened with, which is why this really shouldn't be as a surprise to anyone. To me, the only surprise in this is that it took this long. And again, we've all been assuming, well, why haven't they done it yet? They haven't done it yet because they maybe have something else cooking. And the Knicks, I don't think they want to trade Deuce McBride, or their rookies or any like that. Like the easiest path to acquiring a low-ish money player would be to use Precious Achiuwa in a sign and trade. And so the fact that they stopped waiting, that they brought Achiuwa back, tells me, and I could be wrong, but it tells me that the the likely scenario at this point is that it's just Achiuwa as the backup center to open the season. That's my assumption. Maybe that ends up being proven wrong, but that is my assumption. Because again, just like the complexities involved of trading for another center, and like the fact that again they would need to ship out Deuce. There's no way to do it without shipping out Deuce realistically. And that's where I'll get back to it in a second. But the reporting following the Cam Payne signing from Ian Begley, where initially it was talk, oh, Cam Payne, he's going to be the backup point guard, and then Ian very quickly went back on his own reporting and said, well, no. Deuce McBride is still very much prominent member of the rotation, and even going so far as to say that Kolek was ahead of Payne. But clearly, there was some pushback on that initial report, and I took that whole scenario and I read into it like the Knicks want to make sure everybody realizes that Deuce McBride is still a prominent member of this team and they value him and he's not going anywhere and he's not going to be marginalized. So they don't want to trade Deuce. So if they don't want to trade Deuce and there was nobody out there for them to sign and trade Precious for, well, here we are. And Precious I think he's just going to be the backup center. From a and just really quickly on Precious's the Precious part of this, I think it made all the sense in the world for him because he's getting $6 million. And if you go and look at transactions that have occurred over the last week, 2 weeks, even really like 2.5, 3 weeks, these are all minimum deals, almost exclusively, if not exclusively, that have been handed out over that time. That's all anybody's getting right now, aside from like your Isaac Okoro situation where he's a restricted free agent. So my assumption is and shout out to Jeremy. Jeremy was all over this, and I pushed back on it when we talked about it probably a month ago. I thought there would be more of a market for Precious. It seems as if there was not, because if there was a bigger deal out there for Precious Achiuwa, I'm fairly certain Precious Achiuwa would have taken that bigger deal. The reality seems to be that there was nothing either above the minimum or much higher than the minimum out there for Precious, which is why he was content waiting around for a while. And even more than that, was content waiting around, and then when New York came with their bigger offer, was content waiving his no trade clause. So the bid on the no trade clause briefly in the NBA, every player strives to attain bird rights. Bird rights are attained when you spend at least 3 seasons with on with a team, or if you're under basically one contract for at least 3 years, you get traded and retain your bird rights. When you sign a 1 year deal with the team that you were just with, that is a brand new contract. So because it's a brand new contract, you technically lose your bird rights. So as to guard against that, the league gives everybody who signs a 1 year deal with their previous team, they give them like a loophole. And they say, well, you're going to have a no trade clause because you are still with the same team that you were with. So the whole concept of bird rights is like they want to encourage players to stay with their teams. You stayed with the team that you were with, but it's a new contract. So we'll let you veto any trade because if you get traded, then all of a sudden those bird rights vanish because again, you have signed a brand new contract. And because it's a new contract and because you don't get the benefit of a longer contract that goes with you after a trade, you lose your bird rights. And why are bird rights important? Bird rights are important because without bird rights, you're limited to how much you can re-sign for on your next contract without dipping into a team's cap space. Now, for Precious Achiuwa, do I think this is going to be a big deal? No, I don't. And here's why. Even without bird rights, if you sign a 1 year contract, you get something called non-bird rights, in which a team is able to re-sign you for, I believe, 120% of your previous contract. And then after non-bird rights, it goes to early bird rights, which is what the Knicks had on Hardenstein. That allows for a 75% raise. And then after 3 years, it's full bird rights where you could essentially sign, not essentially, you can sign someone for up to their max. Um, and it won't count against the cap. With Achua, he will have, if he gets traded on December 15th, which is the earliest he can be traded, loses his bird rights, but he will finish the year with non-bird rights on whatever team he's on. That means that team would be able to give him a 120% raise. 120% raise off of the reported $6 million figure is, if my math is correct, means he could sign his next contract starting at $7.2 million. Is there a world where whatever Precious Achiuwa does this year, it puts him in an income bracket where $7.2 million is below his market value? I suppose. I think I would proffer that scenario is highly unlikely. And by the way, if he does significantly outplay that number, well, then he's going to have options on the market, and whatever team trades for him, like I don't think he's going to be screwed because they can't offer him more than a 20% raise without dipping into cap space. It was a very long-winded, convoluted way of explaining why I don't think Precious minded waiving the no trade bit of this deal because he's getting so much money from the Knicks. He's getting $6 million. His minimum contract would have been, I'm pretty sure, it would have been less than half of that. So if all he was getting offered from other teams was the minimum, Precious is doing really well here. So Precious makes out well. The Knicks make out well, not only because they have a backup center that they can rely on and the whole thing. And also, by the way, another thing on Precious, how many teams around the league would he go to at this point in the summer and have a better shot at real rotation minutes than he's going to have in New York? I I mean, you want to tell me New Orleans because they just don't have a center right now, but it seems like there's another shoe that's going to drop on that front, and we're all just waiting to see what it is. Uh, New Orleans, okay, maybe another couple of teams, maybe some of these like young bad teams. But if you're a young bad team, like you want to let your own players, see those minutes, not a guy in Precious's position. So Precious is going to get an opportunity. He got paid. The bird rights thing, not a big deal. The Knicks get their backup center. And then the last part of this, and this is the part I think most people are probably interested in, is the notion that Precious Achiuwa has just essentially made himself a human trade exception. So traditionally, when we have thought about NBA contracts and NBA players signing NBA contracts, the the long and the short of it is if you're a team, you want to sign your player to less money because if they are signed to less money, they will count for less dollars against the cap and they will also be just a better asset. So, um, if we're talking about, let's say Mitchell Robinson on one hand, Mitchell Robinson signed his deal, whatever it is, 2 years ago, and he has performed well enough at times during the course of that contract. It's a descending contract where people are like, oh, Mitchell Robinson, nice player on that deal. He's an even better asset. That's one benefit of signing for a lower number. The other benefit is obviously what we saw with Jalen Brunson. Signed for a lot less money than he could have. He's going to help the Knicks avoid the second apron. So in most cases, signing players to less money is still a good thing. Here's why that is not always true anymore. Because the entire league, and even more so, especially teams that are trying to win, operate not only over the cap, but significantly over the cap in many scenarios. Their only real path to making changes to their roster is trades. This is not rocket science. If you're over the cap, you can't sign anybody in free agency. And unless you're going to draft a player, which again, good teams don't usually have great draft picks, there's only one thing left: trades. If you're a good team and you're trying to win games, the majority of your money is probably going towards players that are very important to your rotation, as is the case with the Knicks. All of the Knicks' highest paid players are guys who they don't want to trade away because they're good and they're trying to win games. So you need additional salary on your books to send out in a trade if you are trying to acquire someone. Now, obviously, there are caveats with all this stuff. Is Precious Achiuwa at $6 million really going to change anybody? Like, is it who's the player that Precious Achiuwa is going to bring back at $6 million? Well, there's not many. Like, if a guy is on a non-rookie deal and he's making around $6 million or a little bit more than $6 million, well, then he's probably not very good. And if he is on a rookie deal, well, and the Knicks would actually be trying to target the guy, then he's probably really, really good, and you're going to have to give up a lot more than Precious Achiuwa to get him. So Achiuwa alone on this number is not probably going to net the Knicks a big time player. But it's not just Achiuwa that is going to be able to be traded. As Fred Katz wrote about last week, the Knicks still have their $5.2 million taxpayer mid-level exception that they could use to sign someone tomorrow. I would anticipate them using that exception to sign someone at some point before the season because that player will also be able to be used as a human trade exception. And combined with Precious Achiuwa, now you could start building up salaries. Now, all of a sudden, if you get Achiuwa plus the guy making the taxpayer mid-level, and there are different ways you could go. If it's a player really worth getting, you could package them with Deuce, and that gets you up around like $17-18 million. You could, if there's like a big time, I don't know, again, it's tough because the salary range we're talking about, like high teens, 20s, I was going to suggest Mitch. Mitch makes 14. So now you got Mitch plus Precious plus this taxpayer mid-level exception guy. You're still only up around 25 million. Go look at the list of centers in the league. Now, I again just throwing it out there. Ian Begley recently reported that the Knicks at some point in time kick the tires on Clint Capella. Clint Capella, wouldn't you know, I should have this in front of me, but of course I don't. Makes, I want to say $22 million. Let's see how close I came. Clint Capella this year, because he signed a 2-year, $45.8 million extension. Clint Capella this year makes $22.2 million. So all of a sudden, Mitch plus now you may not, you could, there are different ways you could construct that deal. And if you're like, well, hold on, Macri, why would the Knicks be trading away both of their centers for one center who's probably not probably at his best is not better than Mitchell Robinson? I have no idea. And I don't think they would do that. But there's a lot of crazy stuff that could happen over the course of a season. For example, Mitchell Robinson could get hurt again. And the Knicks could find themselves in a situation where all of a sudden they are highly incentivized to package his salary with some additional salary to perhaps go out and get a center who, at the very least, has a discernible floor, maybe a limited ceiling, but a discernible floor and a certain amount of reliability that comes with that. Um, there go pull up Hoops Hype's list of player salaries. You'll get, there's other centers out there, not a ton, not many, but out there that you could foresee maybe somewhere down the line becoming available in a deal. And again, we don't know how things are going to shake out as the season goes along. Maybe Jericho Sims takes a step up and he proves himself to be an adequate guy for 10 minutes a night. Maybe the Knicks all of a sudden really do go all in on the idea of small ball and play significant minutes of Randall and OG, at the 4 and the 5. Like, there are so many different ways that this could go. The point right now is not to start speculating about the potential deals that the Knicks might be interested in making 6 months from now. It is merely to point out the fact that they have put themselves in a position to have legitimate wiggle room when it comes to making trades before this season's deadline, because you have another fungible salary. Again, assuming that they sign someone with the taxpayer mid-level, that'll be another salary. Now, the only thing I will say about the taxpayer mid-level is the reason why they might not use it, and several people have pointed this out to me, they could be saving that to sign a buyout guy. A veteran who gets released before the deadline, where you could sign players that could appear on your playoff roster. I think it's somewhere in March. And typically those guys sign for veteran minimums. Well, all of a sudden, if you have the taxpayer mid-level exception, you could pay that player a little bit more than the veteran's minimum. Well, maybe all of a sudden now he might be more inclined to pick you. My guess is that they do not wait and that they sign someone sooner rather than later, because they think there will be a better chance that their roster would benefit long-term from having an additional trade chip than from keeping that salary slot open and being able to sign a buyout guy later. I could be wrong. Wouldn't surprise me. So that's pretty much everything when it comes to Precious. And I'll end, just because, again, I haven't talked about it because I don't think there's that much to say. But what I do have to say about the Cam Payne signing is kind of related to everything that I just talked about in terms of trade flexibility. Because the one place that you don't want to be as a team that is trying to win games is where you could potentially make a deal. You have the pieces to make the deal. The deal would make you a better team, but you also feel, or it would make you a better team on the top end, on the front end of your roster. But you feel like you lack the requisite depth to pull off the trade. So I'll give an example of the opposite of this. Last season, the Knicks sent out not one, but two major organizational tentpoles in Manuel Quickley and RJ Barrett. And I'm not just talking about what their meaning was to the organization. I'm talking about the fact that they were the third and fourth leading scorers for the team. They took the third and fourth most shots on the team. I'm fairly certain at the time they were traded. This was a massive, massive upheaval and you were only bringing back at the time we thought only one rotation player in OG Anunoby because we didn't think at the time that either Flynn or Achiuwa was going to get time and I would argue that had Mitchell Robinson not gotten hurt, then Achiuwa wouldn't have gotten time. Um, Neither here nor there. The point is, you were sending out a ton of minutes, a ton of shots, and you were bringing back OG Anunoby. Only one guy could not fill all that void. Lucky for the Knicks, who do they have waiting in reserve but Deuce McBride, who was ready to step in. You need him to play 10 minutes, you need him to play 12 minutes, you need him to play 15 minutes, and all of a sudden, guys start going down with injuries. You need him to play 48 minutes, he's got your back. And the Knicks knew they had that guy in-house, which is why, I'm guessing, they felt more comfortable making the trade for OG Anunoby when they did. So now, fast forward to where we are presently. And this is where it's a bit of a dicey conversation because immediately after the Cam Payne signing, people were like, oh, the writing's on the wall. They're going to trade Deuce for a backup center, yada, yada, yada. And then people with the hand wringing over, oh my God, is Cam Payne going to play over Deuce with Pride? What an egregious mistake that would be. And conversations about the value of a quote unquote true point guard versus, Deuce, who's more of a wing. All of this was complete and utter nonsense because the Knicks were never like in signing Cam Payne. They weren't going to turn around and be like, okay, great. Now we could trade Deuce McBride. No. Again, they value Deuce McBride. They like Deuce McBride. But they also know very well a couple things. One, they know that there's a lot that they don't know right now. They don't know what players are going to become available during the year. They don't know, and Fred Katz has hit on this point a few times recently. They don't know what issues are going to come up on their own roster, who they might need to go out and target. Are they going to need to bring in a center of some note? Are they going to be good with what they have? Is there going to be an injury? Do they need to make some sort of trade to address that injury? There is so much that they don't know right now. That's number one. Number two, and I want to be very clear here. There's no slight to Deuce McBride. But if you project New York, their rotation to be healthy in a playoff series, meaning Brunson, Bridges, OG, Julius, Mitch, Josh Hart, DiVincenzo, and everybody on down the line, I would argue that the minutes that is going to be available for whoever is the eighth name after those top seven, if there are any minutes available for that player, they will be very few minutes. And this is not a new concept. I've talked about this before. There is, just like there was at the beginning of last season, there's a minutes crunch again right now. So this team, I believe, is operating with the knowledge that they do still have some wiggle room. Again, that's very different from they're going to rush out and go try to trade Deuce McBride. But might there be a need that could arise where out of necessity, not because they want to, but out of necessity, they will have to make that sort of move? I think it's possible. I'm certainly not ruling it out. And in that scenario, would they rather be left with a rookie in Tyler Kolek as the only option to take necessary regular season rotation minutes? Because again, what I was talking about a minute ago, we're talking about the playoffs. It's 82 game seasons, a long season. As last season showed us, you need a lot of bodies to get through that season. And oftentimes more bodies than you think, way more bodies than you think you'll need at the beginning of the season. So I think the Cam Payne signing was more about getting someone else in the door who they know is a competent NBA backup point guard who has played rotation minutes for good teams, played playoff minutes for good teams at Phoenix Suns. Like this is not a foreign concept, the notion of Cam for the my God, I'm forgetting the most recent experience. Philadelphia 76ers. I thought Cam Payne played pretty well in that series. So you're getting that guy. Seems like he's a good culture guy. Seems like he's a hard. The reports are that he's a hard worker. Doesn't seem like he's someone who's gonna upset the apple cart. As I suggested, I think in a newsletter that I wrote shortly after this, I wouldn't be shocked if there was maybe a handshake agreement like, hey, we don't know what's going to happen here. We think that there's a decent enough probability that there might be rotation minutes that open up at some point this year. If that's not the case, we'll, and you think you have a better shot of catching on with another team, we'll release you in time for you to sign. I have no idea if that's the case. It wouldn't shock me if they kind of let him know ahead of time, like, hey, we'll make you whole if this doesn't go the way that you think it might go. Um, because again, to Ian's initial reporting on that subject, where for anybody who missed it, he said, my assumption is that Cam Payne is going to come here and play just because there were other competitors for his services. And why would he want to come sign here in New York if he could go sign a veteran minimum deal elsewhere and have a more guaranteed role? And there's no great answer for that right now because, again, I don't think for a second the Cam Payne is going to play over Deuce Pride. And I know the report that Ian subsequently made about Kolek being over Payne in the rotation. To me, that's completely and totally irrelevant because there is no, there are no minutes. There are no minutes. There, like, you could argue that for as much as we're all happy that Precious is back, you could argue that there are scant minutes available for Precious Achiuwa right now, and that the only way that it's going to make sense and be able to get all these guys the minutes that they want is to play small ball with, again, either Randall or OG Anunoby at the five for significant minutes of every game. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to go with a 9-man rotation. I think Precious will be the backup center for now, and they'll see how that goes. While, of course, continuing to monitor other possibilities. And that's the part that I want to end with is you never know what's going to shake loose in the NBA. You never know what opportunities are going to be on the horizon. You never know when something pops up that you maybe didn't anticipate that it's going to pop up. Nothing would shock me, but I will say at this point, sitting here, it's now 12 a.m. on Wednesday morning, July 31st. I am anticipating that this is going to be the roster that they're going to head into the season with. And that's fine. That's fine. Last thing before I go on that note, and I just got reminded of this as I was getting ready to close out. There was a ESPN article that came out the other day, and usually I don't read the ESPN stuff, but any article, whether from ESPN or The Athletic, where they poll executives from around the league, I'm always very interested in those because I'm always fascinated to see what executives think and are saying about not only the Knicks but every team. And it was largely like high praise for the Knicks and their offseason. Like it was mostly good. But there was one executive, and of course, this is the thing that has made the rounds, who voted the Knicks as having had the worst offseason. And the line that made it into the article was, I'm not sure that they got any better. And I wanted to address that because This is the part where the Knicks content creator is supposed to yell and scream and say that this person, whoever they are, is an idiot, and they should be stripped of their job title and dignity and everything. I'm not going to do that because while I disagree with that statement, I do think the Knicks got better. And I think they got better in a way that will matter in the thing that matters the most for them, which is trying to beat Boston and just generally being a more versatile team. I think with the Mikal Bridges trade, they obviously made themselves far more versatile. And versatility is, I think we've seen now for I don't know how many years in a row, versatility. And when I say word versatility, I mean how many players can you put on the floor during high level playoff games? How many players can you put on the floor that don't take anything off the table? Meaning you make no compromises with them on offense and you make no compromises with them on defense. And they added, yes, he's kind of a role player. He straddles the line between role player and star player. He's somewhere in that in between land. But Mikal Bridges takes nothing off the table. And that's why it's so important that they're now able to pair him with OG Anunoby. Now you have two of those guys. And so they're obviously you've doubled the number of those sorts of players that you have on your team. And you want to throw a DiVincenzo in there who is obviously not the same impact defender as those other guys are. You want to throw Josh Hart in there, even though he's obviously not the level of shooter those guys are. But you just made yourself so much more versatile, and versatility, again, in this specific sense, that's what wins games in April, May, and June. Where I wanted to throw that person a bone who gave that comment is the Knicks last year, like we saw it, they found after the OG Anunoby trade, it's not only that they found a formula that worked, it was they, as a team, just made sense instantly. They made sense when OG Anunoby and Julius Randle were healthy. And they even made sense. They didn't win as many games, but they even made sense when those guys went down, where it was, all right, we got our supreme leader with the ball, Jalen Brunson. And who was Jalen Brunson's second leading scorer or wingman, the guy who was the second leading scorer after Randle and Anunoby went down? It was Dante DiVincenzo, and it wasn't even close. The dude averaged 20 plus points a game. I've said many times, took and made more 3-pointers than anyone in the league over the last third of the season. And just as important as DiVincenzo was Isaiah Hartenstein. And Hartenstein became, I would argue, a top 10 center. I certainly was paid like a top 10 center now. And he was a massive part of their offense. And he was a massive part of their defense. Now, you've taken away Hartenstein, and you've replaced him with certainly a more limited player on the offensive end, at the very least. And you've taken Dante DiVincenzo, and you've moved, again, a guy who is really coming into his own as one of the more threatening, dangerous shooters in the league. You moved him to the bench. Now, you've replaced him with Mikal Bridges, who is a pretty damn dangerous shooter, including in a lot of the ways that DiVincenzo was a dangerous shooter, in his own right. So it's not like you're taking DiVincenzo out and you're replacing him with this doesn't make sense positionally, but like Brandon Ingram, right? Brandon Ingram, super talented player, doesn't want to shoot threes. That's not Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges, you ask him to go put up a dozen threes in a game. He'll go put up a dozen threes in a game. Like that's not the issue. But DiVincenzo, his gravity was so massive. And Mikal Bridges is a little bit of a different sort of player. So there's an adjustment there. There's an adjustment on the center front. And I would even go so far as to say, with Randle back, and now with Bridges, a guy who's used to having the ball like a little bit more, he certainly had the ball more in Brooklyn. OG Anunoby now is fourth on the depth chart in your starting lineup in terms of who gets the ball and who does stuff with the ball. It's not like this team doesn't have anything at all to figure out. They will still need to kind of make sure the pieces fit the way they're supposed to fit. Do I think they'll be able to do that? Absolutely. And coming off I mean, being able to bring DiVincenzo and Josh Hart off your bench when these guys would start for so many teams in the league, that's such a luxury. But again, it's great to have depth. How are you going to make that depth work for you? What are the lineup combinations that are going to make the most sense? And that's where obviously Tom Thibodeau comes into play. So again, do I think the Knicks got better? Obviously, the Knicks got better. And again, I want to bring it back to that first point that I made because it's the most important one. When it matters, April, May, June, they have made themselves a whole lot better in terms of their ceiling, and I would argue in terms of their floor. But they got to get there first. And they do have to figure out some things along the way. I think they're going to be very good. But I saw that comment, and I saw that comment getting raked over the coals, and I was just like, you know what? Let me throw that guy a bone because here's the thing: at the end of the day, what did he say? The executive or she, I don't know who it was. The executive said, I'm not sure how much better they got, or if they got a lot better. Every Knick fan under the sun shouted from the rooftops that they got the rug taken out from under them when a team that went 12-2, fully healthy in January, got injured and was never able to see the floor again. 12-2 is pretty damn good, as I have said many times myself, as many Knick fans have said to me many times over the last 7 months. They were already an elite team. So if you want to look at it like that, they were already elite. Did they get more elite? Again, I don't know. But I just want to say that, and I'm sure people are going to take that totally rationally and not be mad at me at all. Okay, that is it. It's good to be back in front of the microphone, as you could probably tell, because I don't want to stop talking. We will now be back on somewhat of a normal schedule, at least as far as the off season goes. Jeremy and I are planning on recording an episode this weekend or Monday, I think at the latest, in which I'm sure he'll give his take on the Precious stuff. I'm sure we'll talk about some other stuff, catch up on some different things. And yeah, moving forward, like, how we do it here at Knicks Film School, there'll be some evergreen content. We'll have some different guests and all kinds of different stuff. So, lots of good stuff on your way this off season. I am officially back from vacation, not going anywhere where I won't be able to record a podcast at the very least for the rest of the summer. And it feels good. It feels good. It feels good to be back and looking forward to, again, another couple of, 2.5 relaxing months. What is it? August, September. Yeah, so two months. We got 2 months left, and then it's media day. So look, it's already kind of flown by. I'm sure those 2 months are going to fly by, but they'll be fun. We'll enjoy them, and obviously we'll get ready for what promises to be very important next season. Certainly very promising next season, at least right now, and a season where we should have no shortage of things to talk about and to get excited about. So on that note, thanks everybody. And yeah, be back with more fun and games before we know it. Peace out.